Amnon Horowitz was born in Tel Aviv, Israel in June 1967. His date of birth is exceedingly special because this state was in the Six-Day War, on the day that they captured Jerusalem. The Six-Day War was a great territorial achievement for Israel. On the Six-Day War, Israel captured 18,000 square miles. Israel captured places like the Sinai Desert and the Golan Heights. Capturing the Golan Heights was a huge tactical advantage. When the Syrians controlled the area, they would shoot and shell the villages from the mountains. Now they wouldn't be able to. Amnon was born 2 weeks before his actual due date. The reasoning for this is that his mother Hannah had to flee with her children to an air raid shelter. Like me, Amnon is the third son. He has two older brothers, Ra'anan and Tal. As a child, Amnon built a treehouse on a berry tree. He built the treehouse out of scrap wood that he had found and bought. The treehouse had a floor, walls, and a window, my dad described to me. The treehouse was featured on the Ma'ariv daily newspaper when one of the writers passed by his house and asked about the treehouse. Up until recently, the treehouse stood, but when my grandmother moved out a couple of months ago, the tree fell in a windstorm. When my father was 13, he fell in love with something new and strange, a computer. He became a computer geek. In his neighborhood, he was one of the handful of people that knew what a computer was. He used to sneak out of class and go to Tel Aviv University to go to their computer lab. The university was a short walk's distance from his high school. When he was in the computer lab, he met his best friends. I know two of them very well. They are around 20 years older than him. He used to play bridge and go to pubs with them. Drinking with an older person was allowed in Israel at that time. At age 16, Amnon started running the computer lab for science at Tel Aviv University. This was his first job. He kept that job for a couple of years, and he also got paid a salary. At age 18, his father Yitzchak was diagnosed with lymphoma. He died after chemotherapy when his body could not handle the radiation. Amnon was very upset for the death of his father. When Amnon was in the army, he was an officer in the Air Force. He was one of the people that wrote the code for the computer program used by the Air Force. During his service in the army, he met a 23-year-old woman named Revital. Revital is my mother. After Amnon finished his service in the Israeli army, he and Revital decided to move to England. Amnon worked in an office job, and he and Revital lived in a small apartment in Golders Green. In that age, everyone who went to work had to wear a suit. Even the garbage men wore suits. Many of their favorite places in Golders Green are still there, like their favorite Chinese restaurant, the train and bus station next to their house. Last summer, I witnessed these sights firsthand. On our way back to Israel from our trip to Seattle, we stopped in London for a few days. After a year of living in the United Kingdom, Revital and Amnon decided to move back to Israel. There, they rented an apartment in Haifa. Amnon went to study computer science in the Technion University, while Revital went to Haifa University to get a master's degree in geography. She was a professor's assistant. During the time that they both went to the university, Amnon and Revital got married. When Amnon was still in university, my older brother Yotam was born. After Amnon finished his studies in Haifa, he got a job to work for Microsoft. This job took him across the world to Seattle, Washington. My mother and my father both moved to the United States. Both of them lived there together for 3 years. During those 3 years, my older brother Nadav was born. After 3 years of living in Washington, Amnon received a job offer. The offer was for a higher position job, but the job was in Haifa. Amnon and Revital decided that Amnon should take the job and that they should move back to Israel, but that did not last. The couple wanted to buy a house in a place between Haifa and between Tel Aviv. They wanted Amnon to be able to work in Haifa, but they also wanted to be able to see their relatives in Tel Aviv. Amnon and Revital bought a house in Zichron Yaakov, a city rich in history of the creation of Israel. There, the spy agency Nili was run. During their time in Zichron, an amazing thing had happened. I was born. After a year of living in Israel, Amnon received another job offer to work in Seattle. He took the job. Our family had sold the house in Zichron and bought a house in Bellevue. In Bellevue, my two older brothers and I were enrolled in the Jewish day school. 3 years later, my younger brother Barak was born. Our family was very excited to have a new baby boy. A couple of years later, Amnon received another job offer, but this job was not like any other job. The offer was to run the Microsoft project in Israel. Our family of 6 and our dog, Sheleg, lived in Israel for a year. When we left Israel for summer break in Washington, we decided to stay and live there. We lived there for 4 years until Amnon and Revital decided that they wanted to move back to Israel. In Israel, We lived for a year and a half, until the Hamas in the Gaza Strip started to fire rockets at Tel Aviv. My parents then decided to move back to the US. As you can see, our family has moved back and forth from Israel and Washington many times. Who knows whether we are settled here or we will go back.